Well, it's great that we can upload pictures and so on, but we're going to quickly see. In fact, I did kind of promise I would follow up after our last discussion using some 2D graphics manipulation, how we can handle an obvious issue that there is, right? So that's where we get into, as I say here, resizing an image. You get a big picture, often we just want to show a little picture. And to help illustrate that, I just have the last version running here. Now, I took a moment to download and find some pretty good size images from the web, free, of course, royalty free. And so I added them here. Now, oh, did you even notice that how it went sort of bing, 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 like it slowly kind of redrew the screen? I can probably get it again if I go to the next page and back to the first. If you watch carefully, they don't all appear at the same time. Okay, it takes a little moment for each one. That's because each of these images is actually huge, right? If I go to details, you can see it here, and even that is constrained in size, right, by the actual container tag in Bootstrap that's in the layout. So it's actually, I don't know, about twice as big as this, if you could see it full screen. Not quite twice, but pretty big. So these are large images, very large images. So when you're showing a whole bunch of these on an index view, there's a real overhead. There's a huge amount of data that you're pulling to shrink down and show these tiny little thumbnails instead. So that's what we're going to deal with is how do we do that? So it's a different situation, right? Because with a Word document or PDF, you're not going to change it. You upload it, you save it, you download it again, right? You're not going to try to change it here as you have it stored in the database. But images, we often need to do so for, basically just efficiency, right? Do we really need it that big? In many cases, no. So, as I mentioned here in Blackboard, what we're going to use is SkiaSharp. SkiaSharp is a open source .NET Standard project. It's based on, as I say here, the Google Skia Graphics Library, right? But the Sharp, you get an idea, it works for C Sharp, right? So this is a sort of a port of the open source Skia Graphics Library. Has all kinds of advanced manipulations that you can do, but all we're really after in our case is simply shrinking the images down if they're too large. So I have a little copy paste file there. And then basically it's just a class. So let's just get it here. I'm going to add a class. Now notice I'm putting it in utilities because that made sense to me. I mean, I've got other utilities, usually static classes that are there just for me to call upon to do some work throughout my entire web application here. So I'm going to call it Resize Image, but it will be static, right? And it will actually have a single static method, at least at this point. So let me just get the code here out of my copy paste file and we'll put it in place. Oh, did I include the, okay, I've got one too many curly braces. So there, that should come out right. Okay. Now, of course, there's going to be lots of underlining because these are all objects within the SkiaSharp plugin. So we have to get that. So let's come up here to the NuGet Package Manager. We'll get our console up. You'll notice in the comments up here, I say right away, note, we have to install this package for SkiaSharp. Okay, so I'll come down here. I'll just install that, and it'll take a moment or two. There we go. All right, so it's installed that, and we're good. So actually, I think the first time I ran it took a little longer than that, but that's okay. It's in. All right, so now I still have underlining because I need to add using SkiaSharp. There we go. Now that should take care of all the red underlining. Yes, it looks like it did. All right, so now I have my utility here now. Okay, let's just talk a little bit about it. Much of this code is right from that website that I pointed you to, the documentation that's there. I did actually put this together from a couple different posts on the internet, just in the way I wanted it to work, right? So the idea is I'm making my own little static. Notice it returns a byte array, right? And we pass it in. The main parameter is a byte array. So we give it the original byte array, and we're going to get a smaller byte array back, probably smaller, right? Optionally, you can set a maximum height and a maximum width. If you don't, it'll just use these default values, but you can specify bigger, smaller, whatever you want if you don't want to go with these. I thought I fixed that. So I normally would have this the other way around. I'm going to change that in my upload file. Sorry. Okay. Usually think they're a little wider than they are tall. All right. So the basic idea is, right, the original image, the byte array comes in here. Uh, this approach maintains aspect ratio. In other words, it's not going to make it, if people are tall and skinny, they aren't going to be short and fat, and vice versa, right? So a tall, narrow image will shrink to the height of max height, right? But of course, the width will probably be much less than max width, and vice versa for the other situation. An image is never enlarged, okay? It's only ever made smaller with this code. And the MIME type, I've set it up to just return everything as PNG files, okay? If you really want to, you can change that yourself. So I'm not going to go through all the code here. As I said, it's mostly covered in the tutorial. Basically, what we do is we get the original image, right? We figure out the height and width and determine the scaling factor we're going to use, right, to get it down to either the minimum height, or sorry, the maximum height or the maximum width, whichever is the actual constraint that's going to be most effective, right? So once we have that scaling, basically it creates a surface. Okay, we paint on the surface to basically make a new copy of the image with the height and width that we want, right? And when it's done here, we create this new image. Okay, taking a snapshot of that surface we painted on. And here is where we do the encoding. So even as I hover over here, you notice it says encodes the image using the format PNG, right? So if you really wanted to change it, I'm going to just show you here that you can come in here and say format, right? And then there's an enumeration, SK for encoded image format, dot, and there we go. See our drop-down list, our enumeration, GIF files, JPEGs, a whole bunch of other ones, bitmaps, and things, icons, and so on and so forth, right? So there are lots of other choices. So you could add a parameter to this method if you did want to be able to specify different things that you're going to actually utilize for. Maybe I want a JPEG in this case as opposed to a PNG. But PNG just is kind of universal, so I just stuck with that by taking the default. So you can take this further, modify it as you so desire. All right, but of course change the name though. It doesn't say shrink image PNG. Okay, so there's my utility. All right, so how do we use that? Well, right in the bottom of my copy paste file, if I come back here to Blackboard, okay, you'll see down here, I just show you the code will look something like this. So basically, wherever we would normally just have memory stream to array, we just wrap that and pass that as the first parameter to our shrink image PNG method of our static object, right? Optionally, we can specify a size, but we don't have to if we like the default values. Okay, and we should also make sure that we set the MIME type because we're going to get back a PNG. Good practice to set it to a PNG as well, right? We can hard code that in because we're doing a single formatting approach. So let's just see how that would work then. Now we have that in place. Let's come back to our patient's controller. And way down here where we add picture, right? So right now, the way my code is set up this way. So right now I'm getting the content from my memory stream, right? So what I could do is I could add here resize image dot, okay, shrink image PNG and pass it. Now if I want to just take the default values, that's good. I'll just leave it like that. Oh, I got one too many, right? Now, if I wanted to, I could specify a different maximum height and width, but I'm just going to leave it like that, and we're going to see the difference. So I'm going to run my website again. That's the only change I made. Oh, here I just said I have to do it, and I almost forgot to, well, I did forget to do it. Okay, our MIME type, right? Let me come back here. See, I should have gone Control F5. So we're hard coding it into image .png. Oh, PNG. There we go. All right. Now I will this time go Control F5, just in case I have to do something else. Okay, so Here are those nice big images, and we saw again that effect of it takes a little while to get them up because they're so big and huge, and we're just shrinking them down to these tiny little thumbnails. So I'm just going to edit Jane here, right? Come down, we'll browse to find that same image. Okay, I'm going to use the same one again. Doesn't look any different yet, does it? But if I go to details, you see that is the actual size of the image, right? So as opposed to over here, right? So you can see we're actually storing the smaller one. So I'm just going to go through, I'm going to replace each of these with the same image again, but of course this time it will shrink it down. I don't think I'll make you watch me do all of them, so I'll just pause. Okay, so as I said, I replace it with the exact same image file, right? But now they're the actual thumbnail size, right? So you see it comes up instantly. There's no more of that boom, 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 that delay as it has to draw each one because we have tremendously reduced the amount of data being sent down for these little images. And of course, if I go to details, I'm stuck with that same little thumbnail, so, maybe I might compromise and make it, a few hundred pixels wide or tall or whatever, so that it can be a little bit bigger on the details and the edit, right? And the fact that it will shrink it down even further on the index view, I could probably live with that. However, it does introduce a kind of an interesting topic to play around with. We often need in the real world to keep the original image exactly as it's uploaded. Think of things like, pictures of artwork and so on. There could be highly detailed images that we have to preserve. But in a situation like this, where we've got lots of records, of course we're going to want to have a little thumbnail as well. So using our new shrink image approach, we could easily create basically a thumbnail automatically to save along with each of the full-size images, right? Kind of an advanced topic, but it's something that's very real world, and it's rather than compromising and say, well, I'll go to a 500 or something, why not just have both, right? So we're going to do that in our next lesson.